And it's finally a Porsche. All right, so we're back in the garage. I believe I showed the front of the body getting glued up, but now the rear of the body is also in a jig, printed up. I designed this in Fusion, got it 3D printed, and allows me to hold everything in place. Now, I'm actually re-gluing this side. I didn't like the fit, and so I took it off, stripped the adhesive off, and I'm actually using the same adhesive as Matt used, some JB Weld plastic bonder. But now that I've got that going, I can move on to the next part, and that's going to be starting the cage. Now, since everything is done in the jig, it should be in good shape. I don't actually need the body to do the cage work. This is going to be the assembly jig for the cage. This is going to hold all of the tubes that go in the right place. This is actually half of it. So the other half, which is pretty much a mirror image, just goes over. So we'll be able to get everything held well in place. This will hold the tubes, but to make sure that I get the tubes the right shape, I've also got bend templates. These are, you can see it's radius there. So I will take and radius the tubes, make sure that they fit in my jigs, and then I know for sure that they'll fit in this jig. So I've got, this is my main hoop, or the side hoop, I guess we call it, that radius there. This will be like the A pillar goes back, the B pillars will sit here, and then that'll make the C pillar. You can see the double B pillar right there. One tube will sit in here, and then the other tube will sit in there. And these I didn't make another template for because I'll just check that they fit and match that bend right there. Shouldn't be too bad. Now to get this ring roll, or this radiused bend, that's kind of hard to do. But to make it easier, I borrowed this piece from my buddy Ben, Scale Crawler Fab Shop. This is made by NWSD, Northwest Scale Designs. You've seen their chassis fixture, which I've got right there. So this is their chassis table, and I use that pretty often, but Ben had their ring roller. So, or radius roller, I don't know what they call it for sure. So we're going to use this. I'm going to be building this all out of titanium. So you feed the titanium rod through there, and you adjust the amount of radius with this top screw, and then you feed it through on that side. And you just keep going back and forth, and we'll just keep going until we know that it matches this. I'm going to start getting this set up, get this clamped to my table first, and run some tubing through it, or rod technically. I don't know if I mentioned for sure, but I'm going to be making the cage out of solid rod, but this is titanium. And titanium is kind of a cool material. It's super strong. It's a little bit difficult to work with and fabricate with. You have to use a TIG welder, and you have to make sure that you're using the right filler rod that matches the grade of the titanium. This is grade 5 titanium, so that's the filler rod that I'm using. It's a little bit more difficult to bend. It's got a lot more spring back, so we're gonna have to do quite a bit more work with the roller to get the radius where we want it. So I thought I'd just, do a couple of passes to see how easy this was. And I did like 2 passes, and it's already almost perfect. If I hold it at one end, I've got a little bit of a gap there. So I'm just gonna take and tighten that down a little bit more. Almost there. Just a couple more passes with this thing, and I think we're gonna be in freaking perfect shape. That was easy. And this is the main one. And the other nice thing is that I ring rolled an entire piece, and checking the length of the tube that I need, which is basically the length of this template I have here, I've got both tubes exactly the same all at once. So done. And I've got a couple more to do, and that's it. This whole thing is going so much faster than I had expected. I've got my titanium pieces already bent. For bending titanium, since it's solid rod, I use this bender here. This is the BAC Industries Mighty Rod Bender. It's about 40 bucks. This is great for solid rod. So I've had this thing for 15 years. Our A pillar goes up. I've got it held in the jig with a clothespin. This is our big long main hoop, kind of holding it up. Now, I don't have this intersection point in the right spot yet because all these tubes are a little long, but this is going to be our windshield hoop. So holding that in place into the jig, I can see where my intersection point is going to need to be. So I can start marking these tubes, getting them cut to the very specific exact length, so I can start getting these parts tacked into place. And I'll weld it right in this jig. It will melt. That's fine. It's replaceable. It's disposable. And that's the benefit of cheap 3D printed jigs. This tube here, I'm not going to notch. I'm going to 40, well, not 45, but angle cut each side as equal as possible. The mitered joint is lined up fantastic. Now I've moved on to the B pillars. I'm going to try and get them cut and coped so that I can start tacking some things up. I can't really do the side-to-side bars until the other half of the jig is printed, and that's what I'm waiting on right now. But I can get most of this stuff done and kind of getting tacked into place. This is the first B pillar that I've got cut to about the appropriate length, I believe. And now it's time for the return of my over-engineered notcher, Nacho Libre, as we called it. Notching or coping tubing can be a little bit tedious, and I over-engineered the crap out of this. So it's designed with a rotary base, so I can adjust the angle exactly here, and I can match that with the angle that I know from my CAD design. So I'll dial in that specifically. Then this slides through the guide here on the side and goes into this burr wheel on the Makita trim router. So I designed up this thing, had it sended, welded it up, and that's my over-engineered tubing notcher. It's a beast and I love it. So we're gonna get these notched, fit into our jig, and hopefully I can start tacking these together. If I can have that whole piece done, and I've already got the radius done for the side to side, so I can I don't know, I'm just stoked. This thing's going so much faster than I thought. So going to getting the coping set up. I know that in my CAD, that is roughly 94.6. So I only need 4.6 degrees past 90. On here, there's the degree wheel across the bottom. We've got the 0 notches right there. It's super hard to see both in person and on video, but we've got it set to, well, it's about 10 right there. There's 5, so we'll go hair under 5. Now, I just take this and it'll go through that guide bushing and into that wheel. Now, I've also put a couple of black marks on that tube, which you can see one there and there's one there. Those are my cross plane. I marked those in here. So I just need to make sure that that is what is parallel to the ground when I put it into the notcher. Might be hard to see that, but we got a super nice centered coped joint. Oh, it's so nice to have everything just jigged up and perfect. All the tubes are in the jig now, and I've got the tubes zip tied into place so they can't move. They're held nice and solid. I'm going to get the tubes tacked and I'll cool them off with some water. But I've got everything also cleaned. We wiped everything down, including my filler rod, and we're ready to start welding up. I'm using an AHP Alpha TIG 203XI. And I'll just run through my settings real quick for this. My starting amperage is at 5. My pre-flow gas, how much argon flows before I start welding, is 5 seconds. Post-flow, I'm going to turn that up to around 10 probably. End amps 10, up slope. We're gonna put it at 60 amps on the pedal. I'm using a flex head torch. I've got a 3/32 tungsten with a Furic BBW cup on there. That's just what it's called. Pyrex cup, gas lens, whatever. So decent stick out because we got a large diameter cup, but that's how we're going to attack this. I got to sharpen my tungsten before we start, but then we'll hit it. Just trying to keep my jigs intact as best I can so everything stays in place. Since I got water on here after I did that, I'm gonna go back and clean up this joint again. You really got to try and keep titanium clean. And I mean, we're not building spaceships, so it's not like it's the biggest problem in the world, but might as well do the best job we can. After I finish the weld, the reason I keep the torch so close to there for so long is because there's gas coming out of this for an extra 10 seconds. That's to try and keep the joint shielded from oxygen so that it doesn't oxidize so quickly. You try and keep it until it gets underneath of the oxidation point and hopefully gives you a better joint with less contamination in the end. I can tell that the back side of the tube is oxidizing a little bit. And that's because that shielding gas is flowing, you know, past it and not all the way around it. So the backside where it was getting hot, it's definitely oxidized. So I'll clean that up with like some Scotch-Brite, some new Scotch-Brite that's never touched steel before I weld the other tubes in. But so far, so good, and I'm super, super happy. So first side of the cage is tacked up pretty good. Joints are all looking nice there. Pretty much fully welded around those before the other half. This side just finished printing. I didn't get it printed during the day, so I had to wait. Now it's 11 o'clock at night, but this is going so well that I want to see how far I can get on this tonight still. So I'm going to work on all the rest of this. Oh, I got to assemble the back half. The other half of the jig here. Just got to get bolted in place. I'll build this side again just like that, and then these two halves will bolt. Oops. These two halves will bolt together, and I'll be able to put in all the cross braces and the center support all while it's fully supported. So that's my goal. Let's see how far I can get tonight. All the bars are in place. Cut this thing out of the jig. We'll see what kind of shape we're in. There we go. It weighs nothing. It's so light. What I really want to see is this. So it should sit right about there. 12:30. Main camera's dead. Calling this thing a night. And we're back in the studio with the car. You saw me gluing the body in this episode. Finally got the trunk in. I didn't show that part. Used that same JB Weld that we used on the front portion. I had changed up that from the 3M panel bond that I used up front. That was a little bit too flexible, so I went back to that, went to that JB Weld just like Matt did, and it's held really well. So I'm happy that I made that change and followed what he did on that. The jig that I designed up to hold the body made gluing this thing so much nicer. No guesswork. It all just fit in there, held it, and you kind of clamped it in place, put the glue on it, and walked away. That was just one more thing that was, yeah, it was like 50 plus hours of printing, but to make the gluing part of a body that we've spent months on a little bit less stressful was absolutely worth it. Now you will see this temporary windshield in there. That's just a 3D print of a mock-up windshield and cowl area. I just wanted to see what this thing was gonna look like. So knocked out a quick design of that just so I could visualize it, especially with the cage. And it was exciting, and I'm super happy with how everything's looking and how everything's fitting and the parts are matching together. Everything's been a success so far, and that's a big one. Now with that 3D print there, this is the design of the final windshield mold. It's already been printed and mold release waxed. This is the RW4 wax from Easy Composites. One of you viewers sent me 4 cans of it, and so thankful. I love this mold release wax. Thanks again for that. With that, I also have already done the silicone portion of it, so that's ready for this to be loaded and that to be our pressure piece. And then I've also got a backing pressure plate. So throw that on the back side of it, compress with it. So that'll be ready to go tomorrow. I started out the video showing you the detail of the cage fab. Again, this is titanium, about 30% lighter than DOM steel tubing even though this is solid rod. It's also way stiffer than DOM tubing. So where DOM tubing is still a little soft, it can bend and it can dent, things like that. This is nothing like that, so much stronger. Super cool, and I like the way that it looks. Using the jig to fabricate this made everything go wildly easy, but none of it would have gone nearly as easy as it did if I didn't get to borrow that tubing roller from my buddy Ben at Scale Crawler Fab Shop, who bought it from NWSD. And since this one went so well and so easily, I also went ahead and built Matt's cage for him. Now, I did build his out of DOM steel, and that's not just out of spite. Since there is going to be other pieces that he's going to have to add and fabricate and work with, he doesn't have a TIG welder, so he can't work with titanium. He's gonna have to be able to work with steel. That made this the easiest, and that is why I did that for him. So again, so easy. The jig is just an absolute winner, and I can't say how happy that thing made me. I built Matt's video on a live stream. I start to finish did this cage in 90 minutes from nothing to finished. So if you want to go watch that, I'll link to it in the description below, and you can see the whole thing in nauseating detail. The other thing that I got done was the design of the flat 6 twin turbo engine for the back. I put a ton of time in that engine model as well. Lots of cool little details, sized for scale hardware. Got it all done, sent it to Matt, and he has printed both of them already. He printed them at an ultra fine detail, and then he's doing all of the painting and weathering. And I believe that he's going to go through that weathering process in his next video. He sent me some photos of mine, and I'll include that, but again, he's gonna go step by step through what he did. To fit that motor in the back, I did have to make some modifications to the chassis. So I have to finish all of those modifications, get the chassis ready to do the final carbon cutting. That will allow things to start going back in the chassis, kind of their forever home. So that's on the list of things to get done, and it shouldn't be too hard to knock out. The next time you see this car though, my hope is that I've got a number of the cuts back from send.com. I'm going to use them to cut the parts that I'm going to design for the front bumper mounts, the cage mounts that'll go around the bottom and tie back into the chassis, as well as possibly some rear skid plate stuff, a few things here and there. I need to finish those designs ASAP and get them off to the laser. Hopefully those come back, and while they've been there, I've been finalizing the exact design for things like the front and rear bumpers, also like the rear taillight section that has to get, designed and 3D printed to fit in there. But once we get to that part, this body is going to be on there in its final place. The cage will be mounted in there in its final place. We can start getting into the details of the interior, which I'm actually super excited about. And there's still a lot of other functional details that I'll need to get to, like how are we going to put the battery in there, and where are we going to put the battery, and things like that. Class 2 and Class 3, almost nothing accomplished. Time is ticking. I've got to do some things. I did build like axles and transmission shocks for the Class 2, but that's about all. So I've got to start making some progress on that. But if I didn't end up getting to any of them and I only focused on this at the same time, I wouldn't be that mad. So I love this vehicle and how it's coming along, to the point that I just don't care about anything else. This is my number one, but I will for sure, I'll for sure get things done. It'll happen. I don't need that much time. Hope you guys are enjoying following along with this stress-filled project. If you're enjoying this whole process so far, let me know. Drop a comment below, hit the like button, subscribe if you're not already. Don't forget to watch Matt's videos next week. You can catch up with the whole series in the playlist. Follow along. See if we can get this thing done. As always, I appreciate you guys watching. See you on the next one.